Good morning. Today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start our exploration of the concept of the law of supply and the law of demand, which are very important in economics to understand how we determine price in a free market system. First off, we've done a flowchart on the economy, and I want to show you how the economies function in the bigger picture from a balcony view. You have households, we have government. After completing our role of government, we know that the government does have a role to play in the economic system. So how does it function and how does it work? So household and firms communicate back and forth with each other. They wanted to, well, you can see this with toilet paper, household supply and sell factors of production. They want to sell land. They want to be able to offer opportunities. So they offer their labor to the firm. The firm helps demand by paying the people to be workers in their factory, as well as the firms supply and sell goods to the individual households, and the consumer buys and sells those goods. We can see those factors all being impacted by the hold in place in multiple states and the slowing down, and how we can go have 6 million people unemployed. One of the things is that unemployment is because of an event that nobody could control. So keep that in mind. Hopefully that can resolve itself fairly smoothly. The role of the government involved in this is that, hey, the government, we provide labor to the government, they provide payments, or companies provide products like N95 masks, and then the government should be sharing those out and they receive payments in return. We all pay taxes into the government, and then the government uses that money and puts out goods and services to the individual households. So we're starting to see how a bigger picture of the economy functions. One of the most important things is price. So we're now going to look into what is supply and what is demand, and how does it determine price. Supply, demand falls slop, so you can see is going to be constantly balanced. I want you to view supply and demand like the old lemonade stand game that we used to play, where you start the day out and you should I'll post a link and we'll actually play it, so you get an idea of like you're the producer and the supply of lemons, the supply of sugar, the supply of ice, the supply of cups. And then that's based on the demand, which can be impacted by the weather, by how thirsty people are, what the quality of your product is. Just realize that this is an ongoing constant in a free market system. So here we have some news just to show you the importance of supply and demand. Is like, if you're going to be a startup company, the most important thing you can ignore at your stake is you cannot ignore the law of supply or demand. You know, how Uber will meet the demand on nights like New Year's Eve. It's like, if you ever think about what has to go in to be able to provide an Uber or a Lyft driver so they can get there, and what they have to do, they honor the law of supply and the law of demand. You know, constant jobs, even fantasy football has an understanding of there's a very few elite quarterbacks, and the demand that's going to be on those. And Apple iPhone, even Apple is impacted by the law of demand. You have to be aware of these things to be able to make a profit, and it's all about making a profit. So what is demand? Well, you know, as a consumer, I think we understand demand fairly well. It is a willingness and ability to buy at a range of goods and a range of prices during a given time. It's like, if I have the money, I will buy. If I don't have the money, I won't, but I also have to want it. And there's a range of goods at a range of prices. I can go and buy a low quality bag that's something that's very utilitarian, or I can go out and get a Dooney and Burke's bag. Then we show this willingness on a supply curve or a demand curve, where price is on the left and Q is on the horizontal axis, price is on the vertical axis. And what we know is that, hey, price and quantity starts at 0, quantity expands outward. How many do I want? And just think of it this way. All right, this is one individual. That individual is willing to pay a higher price to get that many products. People shop at high-end stores. And then throughout the constant period of days, even when you study the stock market, you will see people are willing to purchase different quantities at different prices. And what is driving them is the price. But if you smooth out this constant of day-to-day or minute-by-minute purchases, you start to see the demand curve. So think about this oddity. It's like, you stop to get gas, and across the street is a gas station, and you see that gas station is selling the gas for 5 cents more. And you're saying to yourself, who would shop for gas there? Well, somebody who really, the convenience of being on that side of the street is more important to them than saving 5 cents. You know, people are willing to purchase things at different prices and at different quantities at different times. That is the law of demand. But it impacts us. So I take away the individual prices and I get the law of demand curve, where D, the red line demand, is labeled D. And the law of demand is going to establish certain rules that we're going to go over right now. So at this price, this consumer at P1, right, the consumer is willing to purchase at that price, but he's only going to purchase, or she is only going to purchase at Q1. High P1, high, people will demand, quantity low. Here, P2, a lower price, and obviously now it's a lower price, people will demand more. P movement down the curve, and Q2 increases. And again, on this demand curve, P3, and now you get to Q3, and we start to see the rules for the law of demand. The higher the price, the less quantity will be demanded. Now you're starting to understand one of the universal concepts in marketing is a sale, or the purpose of advertising is to increase the people's demand for a product. The law of demand states a negative relationship between price and quantity. Higher the price, the less quantity demanded. Lower the price, the more quantity demanded. And now we will look at supply. Supply represents how much the market can offer. We're seeing this play out in this crisis. You know, there's like a global demand for toilet paper. There's a global demand for PPE or face masks, and it should not surprise anyone that the supplies of these have been stretched, and now there is into a supported. So we're into what is known as a shortage because people are demanding more of those products. And one of the key thing is like to stimulate the production of those products. The quantity supplied refers to the amount of a certain good producers are willing to supply when receiving a certain price. So there's a trigger to increase production. You can either demand that they do it with using National Emergency and Defense Act saying to 3M, you must produce these masks, or you can let price do that as a trigger to get producers to produce more. The correlation between price and how much of a good or service is supplied to the market is known as the supply relationship. So here we have the law of supply. Notice it is direct opposite of the law of demand. S is the red line, and P on the vertical, and Q on the horizontal. They are the same. So at P1, at this price, the supplier, at this price, the higher price, the supplier is saying, oh, that's really good. I can make some money on that. That's increasing my profit. Then I'm going to produce at Q1. Right? Suppliers will produce at a high price. They will produce or supply at a higher level. At P2, the price has gone down. The relationship is the price is going down. And now I only want to produce at Q2. And as the price shifts down even more at P3, I will produce even less. So the trigger for supply is the higher the price, the more I will produce. The lower the price, the less I will produce. So the relationship for the law of supply is a positive relationship with price and quantity supply. The higher the price, the more quantity demanded. The lower the price, the less quantity demanded. This is what a sale is all about. Merchandise sitting in a store in the mall after winter is over and need to replace shelf space for summer products is clear out the shelves of the winter products. How do you do that? Well, you lower the price, and that brings in people to clear out the supply, and the sales don't last long because there's not as much to get rid of. So how does this interact with price? And this is the most important thing about the law of supply and the law of demand. It is used for us to discover price. Price, therefore, is a reflection of the relationship between supply and demand. However, proper price discovery also depends on other variables, the number, the size, location, and competitiveness of buyers and sellers. If you're the only one making the product, you have a monopoly, you can pretty much control price. And people have been trying to do that for centuries. And the closest thing you can get is into video games. If you think about video games, we've been paying pretty much the same price for quite a while on video games because of the number, size, location, and competitiveness of the buyers. It's a controlled market. The amount, timeliness, and reliability of market information and price reporting are also crucial. We need the market will respond, but the amount and timeliness and the information they are getting has to be accurate. So how do supply and demand interact with price? We have D0, right? And here we have price movement along the demand curve. Price movement is any time of a relationship up or down the demand curve. That's known as movement. And we also can have demand shift. Demand shift is that the demand for the product has actually gone up. That is what is occurring right now for toilet paper and for groceries. Americans are buying 3 times as much meat as they have done on a normal everyday situation. So demand has shifted. Now, just because demand has shifted doesn't mean that the supply is there to meet it. That's D1, so we have a new demand curve. Shifts represent an actual increase or decrease of demand or supply, and that's what we're going to be focusing on. We have D0, we have a shift to the right, that's an increase in demand, and then you have D0, and now you have a shift to the left, which means a decrease in demand. Supply, the same thing occurs. We have a shift in supply to the left. Is supply here actually increasing or is it decreasing? As you look, you can see that supply is actually decreasing. And a number of factors can impact that. Like in Japan, in Kobe, Japan, there was an earthquake which destroyed one of the factories that produced important components for the Game Boy. And that earthquake led to a shortage of supply. It cut the supply of components, and the prices later on would reflect for Game Boys would go up. This is a supply decrease when it shifts to the left, and when the curve shifts to the right, it will be the supply is increasing. I have 1 restaurant. I decide to open up another restaurant. Now I have 2 restaurants. That has increased the supply of food that I can now serve to my customers. So supply increases, shifts to the left. Price therefore is a reflection of supply and demand. So I have D0, and then I have S0, where those two interact, where they are in perfect balance, is here. That's what we're striving for in a perfect situation. We're maximizing efficiency. We are using enough resources to meet the demand. We don't have shortages and we don't have a surplus. Here you have equilibrium, market balance between demand and supply. All right, that's going to end this quick lesson on supply and demand, and we'll be using this to put into our commodity project later next week.